Jumbo.
Hello. Have you seen the new Mean Girls, the musical?
No, I haven't.
I want to.
I do love watching. Is it Renee Rapp? Is that her name?
Ugh, I love her.
I love watching interviews of her. I think she's hilarious.
She calls herself mother.
People are upset. Yeah. And they're like, oh, she has no media training. Why the fuck do we need media training? Just let people be a little bit chaotic. She is feral February, and I appreciate it.
Anyway,
lighten up.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, this is Two Girls, One Ghost.
Two Girls, One Ghost. And we are your ghostesses. That is Corinne.
Hello.
I am Sabrina. I just had a burp, and I'm really sorry.
I told Brian yesterday, I was like, me and Sabrina were recording, and I was saying how I burp constantly now that I'm pregnant. And she said, I've always been a burper. And Brian was like, I have never heard you burp before you became pregnant. And I was like, see? But I realized it's because when we record, I've always been a little bit of a burper because I just suck in so much air and I'm constantly like, to the next sentence.
Or I feel like you've like scarfed food down before recording is a bunch. So it's like.
That's true. It's like the indigestion. It's like I have 2 minutes to eat a full meal in between our recordings. Yeah. So you view me as a burper because you experience all of the burps that I ever have given to the world.
You've given me all your burps, and I'm honored to accept and receive your burping.
And shout out to Jamie, who edits our podcast, because without Jamie,
you would get a whole mouthful of burps.
Every 5 minutes.
An earload, I should say.
And it's not cute. It's not polite. It's deep within.
It's feral and not in the cute way.
I think my contractors just locked me out of the house. They were just, I'm in the sunroom and they were just touching
They're like,
the doorknob.
None of that.
I'm not allowed in. Anyway, that doesn't matter because we're here to tell ghost stories, so I will be entertained for the next hour.
I have a story from our listener, Alexandra, and it is a whole smorgasbord of fun.
Ooh, lovely. A little charcuterie of ghost stories. Fun paranormal. Let's hear it.
And some alien.
Of course.
A little alien appetizer for your taste buds, everyone. Hey, Corinne and Sabrina, I've been listening to you guys for a while. I remember my boyfriend at the time, now husband, would rave about a podcast. And so I decided to look up a podcast in the college parking lot. Fitting, because I think within episode 1 of y'all was afraid to walk to their car from their dorm. God, I hope this is a reference for you guys and not another podcast I'm getting confused with. But yes.
Honestly, maybe. I have no idea.
I think back to how scared we were recording the first 2 years of the podcast. Because we were like, oh, we're like fully dabbling with this now.
Well, and there was one time where the zipper on my like recording duffel bag started moving and I freaked the fuck out. And now if that happened, I would have been like, oh yeah, the like heating system probably kicked on and there's like a small vibration to the house. But back then I was like, literally there's a demon moving my zipper.
Yeah, which it could be. But now
maybe there was.
We live with our demons now.
We're buddies.
So here's my story. If I start throwing a bunch of things, please forgive me. I get super excited when I'm sharing stories and my ADHD takes the wheel.
Welcome to the club.
I truly believe that my dad has a spirit or something attached to him. The reason I believe this is because growing up, he told me he had played with the Ouija board and that he wasn't afraid of it because why would he be scared of a kid game? I am very certain that he did not close the Ouija board properly. Therefore, he exposed himself to allow negative entities to come through. While growing up, I always recall my mother saying my dad would speak in a tongue that wasn't his own. Do we have the same dad? Obviously, my mother being... I mean, how many dads speak tongues in their sleep?
I don't know.
Obviously, my mother being freaked out, she would shove him to wake him up. One night, my dad was in a deep sleep, and he swears that the following event I'm about to share was not a dream. So my dad told me he was sleeping when he felt something on top of him. And when he woke up, he saw the devil pulling him, my dad, off the bed. And he saw smoke on the bedroom floor, but he couldn't bring himself to speak until he let out the scream, and the power went out in our home. And my mother woke up immediately, unaware of the visions and everything my dad was seeing. But the power had gone out. My dad ran outside to make sure we weren't the only ones without power, and it seems that the entire neighborhood lost power in that exact moment where my dad had woken up to a devil-like entity pulling him off the bed.
Ew. Oh my God. That's powerful.
My family and I moved to another home because my brother and I were getting older, and so we needed more space. And this is when things started to get turned up. Within the new living space, turn up the ghosts, turn up the volume, increase paranormal activity by volume 3. Within the new living space is where we as a family experienced a series of eerie events. When I would take showers and was home alone, I would hear little kids running down the hall giggling. There was a time that I was convinced that there was an intruder in our home, and I had to FaceTime my friend in case I was attacked or killed so that she could be witness and could help solve my case.
Just give her a dash of trauma. I wish there was like that you could FaceTime 911 and that there'd be just like some really chill person on the other end that's like, that's fine. I'm cool with sitting here for 30 minutes just in case something happens. You're not wasting my time.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how many 911 calls are just like a waste of time.
Probably a bunch. I mean, I definitely have been one of those people.
You have?
Well, I don't think it was a huge waste of time.
What'd you call for?
Well, I've called 911 a few times. Twice has been an actual emergency. The one kid that I found with alcohol poisoning in the library that I like flipped over and called 911 and was like smacking the vomit out of him. The other time was someone in college jumped on her boyfriend's back, flew over, cracked her head, gushing blood, called 911.
These are all...
But then those were good times.
Yeah.
But there was a time in high school where I didn't know that there was a non-emergency line, and I called 911 because I didn't know what else to do and was like, hey, there's someone's like pet cat is dead in the middle of the road. And
really sad.
Luckily it's Vermont. It's a small town and there wasn't that much to do. And they were like, oh, okay, thank you. We'll send someone out to clean it so that that person doesn't have to see happen upon their cat.
That's so sad.
And I was like, okay, thanks.
Also, what a great response. Only in Vermont.
Yeah.
That's not a waste of time. You were trying to be a good civilian and didn't know there were other numbers you can call, which I didn't know until I was in college.
Right. I was 16. I was like, oh my God, I can't imagine someone else finding their cat here.
Yeah. We called 911 together.
Oh, yeah. And they did nothing. Texas.
They were so rude.
So we saw a drunk driver and it was in Texas and we were following them for like 40 minutes.
And they were swerving.
We called after like maybe 5 minutes. And then we still were following them for a long time and no one came to intervene. And I know it was in Texas because I told my brother and he was like, yeah, people just like don't care about drunk drivers out here. He's like, I feel like so many people drive drunk. There's signs everywhere saying like, do you see a drunk driver? Call it in.
Yeah.
And then you call it in and they don't do anything.
And they don't care. We did try. Anyway, how did we get here? Volume 3 of Paranormal Activity is happening. Okay. However, Alexandra says the spookiest room went to the spookiest bitch in the house. Me. My room was the furthest room in our home, isolated from everyone through a dimly lit and elongated hallway. Yay me! Within this room, I experienced some of the greatest terrors of my life. The summer of 2014, every single night I was awoken by what felt like someone tugging my feet and my blanket way below my waist. I always had my blankets up to my neck. I would leave my bedroom door open because I was so afraid of how dark my room would become when I closed the door. However, even with the door open, I always felt like there was someone watching me from the hallway, watching me sleep.
Mm.
After a while, I no longer experienced these nightly tuggings, and a few years later, for approximately a month, I would hear footsteps above my ceiling. But the worst part were these footsteps always occurred between the hours of 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. And if you're thinking, hey, that's not that scary, well, here is what to this day leaves me a little unsettled. There would be nights that my dad would stay up late working on blueprints for work, and he noticed that my bedroom light was on, and it was a school night. So he would come to my room, make sure that I was in bed, and when he would walk in, he wouldn't see me. He said he would look around my room, and he would find me behind my door. He claims that he saw me standing in the corner with my head bowed down, and he would say my name, and all I would do is point towards my bed and say, "There's a man in my bed."
That is horrifying. The crouch position.
Shortly after, he said that I ran into my bed and went to sleep. Now, I must admit, my entire childhood, I did sleepwalk to the point that my parents had to install various locks on our main door to ensure I didn't leave. And I would hover over my parents sleepwalking as they slept. You are a terrifying child.
This is terrifying. And especially too, I feel like it almost makes it scarier given that their dad has experienced
I was just
kind
going
of
to say
like
that.
a demon. So it's not like he can just write it off being like, oh, kids, their imaginations, she's probably just having night terrors or something, weird little sleepwalker. It's probably like, holy shit, did something follow me, follow them? Like, what's going on?
Right. And also like sleepwalking, seeing and experiencing Alexandra's dad experienced the entity pulling him off the bed which is different than like the sheets being pulled off, but it is a similar type of haunting where I'm like,
yeah,
is this an inherited paranormal trauma?
Yeah, these seem like really big hauntings too.
Could you imagine waking up to your child sleepwalking standing over you?
I could not, but I know my mom could because I know that happened to her multiple times.
Hate it so much. It's horrifying.
Where I'm like, it's just breathing there in the darkness. And she's like, oh my God, what do you want? And I'm like, there's fuzzies in my bed and you need to watch the horses. And she's like, what the fuck?
There are fuzzies in my bed and you need to watch the horses.
Yeah, I made her one time so that I could have time to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I like sleepwalked, went and peed. But before peeing, I needed her to watch my horses. So I needed some supervision. I needed extra help. She did. She watched my horses so I could go pee.
That's
and then
very nice
I went to bed.
Man, I cannot wait for how creepy your kid's going to be. You are in for it, especially because of what you put your mom through. Like,
I know.
Yeah. Okay, the runner-up for unexplained eeriness is the kitchen. Within this kitchen, we would have containers fall out, but only plastic containers. My brother and I would hear our kitchen chairs move and be out of place. My brother confessed to me that when he was younger, he would see the kitchen cabinets open and close, and he would cry because he didn't know what to do. One day, he had left his AirPods on the table next to the kitchen, and he was looking for them all day. There was also a camera next to the table, and the AirPods were right there, and a piece of footage literally went missing, and within the next clip, when it worked again, the AirPods were gone.
What? That's a weird glitch in the Matrix sort of situation.
Right. My brother used his laptop to find his AirPods, and turns out they were in the kitchen trash, all the way at the bottom.
That is bizarre. And this is reminding me so much of a video that made its rounds on social media that a girl had uploaded. She was in the back kitchen. Was it like an apple or an orange or something that she's like slicing, turns for 1 second, goes back, and it's whole again. And so then you see her like really confused and then just slice it again. And then she had gone to look back at the footage because it was like, I literally sliced this 1 second ago.
Right.
And you just see it. Like there's
glitch.
It's just like a phoom, and the apple's whole again.
Which is so weird. That reminds me also, similar to the AirPods thing, there was a video of a woman who was like home on her bed, had her AirPods in, and when she opened her AirPod case, there were AirPods in there, but she had her AirPods in her ear.
Yes.
And they literally Bluetooth, when like she went to connect them, they were the same name as the ones that were literally in her ears.
Right. Which I like those glitches. I like the glitches where you get double of something. I don't like the ones where things go missing.
Agreed. Okay. So I could share more stories about everyone's experiences in that home, but this email will be so freaking long. Alexandra, I want to know more. However, I'll end with a very recent event. My brother and I were getting ready for the Lana Del Rey concert, and when we were sitting by the couch, we got a smell of something rotting. But otherwise, the whole apartment smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. That smell was right in between my brother and I. And since I moved out last fall, my brother and I joked maybe the entities missed their spooky bitch and wanted to feel included and just sat between us. Okay, but this last story. Aliens. This past Virgo new moon, I was outside charging my crystals, burning my basil, and putting my water to be charged, when out of nowhere, I see an aircraft with different colors flashing, and I feel hypnotized. I start to freak out and think, holy mother of pearl, aliens, bro. And as the aircraft got closer, I could hear the sounds of an airplane. So I guess it wasn't aliens. However.
Oh, shoot. It feels like the perfect setting, too, where it's like you're manifesting, you're open.
I know.
You're one with the universe. When else would they come visit you?
During the Virgo new moon. I am curious what the like different color lights situation is, though. But anyway, Alexandra said, I came up with this possible idea that I shared with my friend. What if aliens are listening to alien rap and that's why they zoom by in their UFOs because they're just vibing? Also, we would befriend the aliens, manifest them, and we could ride in their UFO and they could just take us to the moon for a quick viewing. That would be really cool. All right, ladies. Y'all stay safe on tour. I loved sharing my story. Hopefully it gets read on the podcast. So my husband is left stunned to speak when he starts to connect the dots that I'm the one that sent in this story.
You beat him to the punch. He didn't send in any stories that we know of.
That's from Alexandra.
Wow, Alexandra agreed with all of the situations that you've made up as potential cool opportunities with aliens. Would love a trip to the moon.
Would love.
I mean, this bitch is haunted. Her whole family is. I don't know what more to say.
Seriously, I feel like we only got a little taste of all the hauntings that Alexandra and her family experienced at this house because her dad is haunted. What happened with that? Has he experienced anything since? What is he saying? in his sleep. What language? I'm curious. Can we record both of our dads sleeping and find out if they're speaking the same language?
Oh, that would freak me out. If we found out that it was the same, then it's like, are they part alien? Are they Bluetooth creatures that like the aliens communicate and speak through? We are the vessels. We're the walkie-talkie.
I would prefer that over the alternative of my father being possessed. Alexandra, we can have a support group.
Although there's a strong argument for the possession, given that Alexandra's dad did have a demon over him. So
the power going out at that exact moment is really scary. Like with the whole neighborhood.
It's proof that whatever he was experiencing was
terrifying,
was real, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not just like, oh, I woke up from a horrible nightmare. That was crazy. It's like there's actual evidence that the energy that was surrounding this event was huge and powerful and affected way beyond just him in his bedroom.
Seriously.
Oy vey.
Sleepover at Alexandra's?
Yeah, you FaceTime me from that because I'm not going over. Okay. Hi, Sabrina and Corinne. My name is Lorena. I absolutely love listening to you guys discuss anything spooky related, and I recently found your podcast and started it from the very beginning. I have years worth of stories to listen to, but since I drive almost 2 hours round trip for my job 4 days a week, it's truly perfect. A couple weeks ago, in one of your earlier episodes, a listener story from Mexico caught my attention. It reminded me so much of the stories that my grandparents and my parents have passed down to us. American ghost stories spook me, but the ones from my home country genuinely terrify me.
Agreed.
So I thought I would share. Let's all just be spooked together.
Hell yeah.
There are 3 different stories that I thought I should share. And these are the ones that have really stuck with me most throughout the years. I even called my grandma before writing the email so that I could tell these stories accurately.
Yes.
These all take place in my mom's parents' home in Guanajuato, Mexico. Also, can I just say, we agree with you that Mexico has some of the scariest stories. And even my mom, she'll call me after we read anything about like Mexican ghost stories and be like, yep, that was freaking horrifying. They're always the scariest.
And Philippines. I feel like Philippines and Mexico, like those
Philippines,
two. Always.
100%. They get us.
Yeah.
Okay. The first story involves my worst fear, dolls. For backstory, my grandpa used to drink a lot and would regularly get home drunk. He was an angry drunk, so a lot of the time he would hit my grandma or berate anyone close to him. According to my grandma, one night he came stumbling home. It was around 1 a.m, and she usually waited for him and my uncles to come home on the nights that they decided to go out drinking. She heard my grandpa walking up the walkway, and she could hear him calling for her. Knowing he was angry and would probably end up hitting her, she locked herself in her room with my 2 aunts. At the time, my aunts were about 15 and 17 years old, so what they heard couldn't be written off as just a child's imagination.
So sad.
I know. My aunt's rooms were an extension of her room, so there was only one way in. The walls were thin, so my grandma could hear him walking by through the home, yelling at her to come out. By this point, the commotion had woken up my aunts as well. He tried to beat down their bedroom door. He was so drunk, it was impossible for him. My grandma shouted at him to go to sleep and sleep it off in another bedroom, and that they would talk in the morning. After he eventually got tired of beating at the door, he went to another room that was a shared wall with the room that my grandma and my aunts were in. And in the room, my grandma could hear my grandpa swear and throw things around. This room had one of my aunt's collection of dolls. Some were porcelain, some were plastic, some cloth. My grandma and my aunts all swear that they started to hear children's laughter coming from that room. At one point, my grandpa starts arguing with what they assumed were the dolls, telling them to shut the hell up and to stop looking at him. The laughter got louder. And after this, they heard my grandpa leave the room. As soon as the door shut, the dolls stopped laughing. Oh, I have chills. My grandpa ended up sleeping on the porch. And in the morning, my grandma and my aunts collected all of the dolls and they burned them because they believed the devil had taken possession of them. I would keep them in my room. I feel like they would be protected. They're protecting you.
Right. But I can't tell if it's like
shame.
I like want to like this story, but there's also a part of me that's like, okay, is there a dark entity though that's mocking him and like trying to take over him because of his current state?
True. And like taunting him, trying to make things worse.
I wouldn't trust it.
That's a good point. My grandpa was later asked what he saw or what he heard, but he refused to talk about it. He did remember it though, because anytime it was brought up, his face would drain of color and he would be visibly shaken. He has since passed, so we'll never really know what he experienced in that room of dolls.
That story is just so scary on so many levels. And I'm so sorry that this like cause such trauma for like your family. And I do want to believe that the dolls were mocking him, or like there was like a spirit being like, we're going to be mean to you because you're being mean. I want to believe that.
Yeah. It does also feel like a scene that would be an American Horror Story where like the bad guy kind of gets really disoriented, and you know, it's kind of like one of those circus-y moments where like all the evil and things around him start laughing, and you're just like so out of place and start to spiral even more than you already are.
But the fact that everyone else heard the dolls.
Right. That the three of them heard the dolls, and it was getting louder and louder. And that he was reacting. He was like, stop laughing at me. Stop looking at me.
Because it would be one thing if you didn't hear the kids laughing and you just heard him like saying like, stop laughing at me, because that would be like, okay, he's drunk and this is, you know, his own delusion.
Yeah, he's hallucinating, or he's assuming that you're laughing behind the door.
But everyone heard it.
Everyone heard it. The second story also involves my grandparents. One night, my grandpa and my uncles were out drinking, so my grandma was awake waiting for them. Behind her house, there was a 5-foot gap between the home and their fence. At the far end of the gap, my grandparents stored their firewood. It was around 3 a.m, and my grandma decided that she was going to make herself a coffee to stay awake. But they didn't have an electric stove, so she had to make a fire to heat up the water. And they also didn't have porch lights or anything outside for that matter, so it was pitch black outside. She said when she went outside to get the firewood, she sensed that someone was watching her. She ignored the feelings and she headed towards the back of the home. She was walking, and she heard footsteps behind her. At one point, she thought that maybe it was my grandpa, that he'd come home and he was looking for her. But every time she looked behind her, there was no one there. Hurriedly, she grabbed the firewood and she went back inside. After making her coffee, she was still curious, heaven knows why, as to why she was hearing these footsteps. And her bathroom window faced the back of the home, so she went back there to see if she could see anyone or see anything. She said as she was walking towards the bathroom, she heard a growl. It sounded like it was right outside of the window. And my grandma, being the badass that she is, decided she was going to open the window. But as she got closer, a shadow of a man, illuminated by the moonlight, walked and stood in front of it.
Oh?
She froze. She started praying. The man looked to be staring at her through the window and slowly turned and then walked away. Her first instinct was to grab their gun and go outside because she was convinced it was someone trying to break into their home. So she headed towards the back of the house. She stood at one edge of the house, looking directly at where the firewood was, and standing there was a tall black shadow. She shouted for him to leave or she was going to shoot him. Once she said that, he turned and all she could see were his red eyes. And she shot 2 rounds at him, but he disappeared. My uncles were coming home at that time and they heard the gunshots. After my grandma told them what she saw, they grabbed their guns and they went to go search the property, but they found nothing. My grandparents had chickens, pigs, horses, goats, and guard dogs all around the property, and they usually alert my family to someone or something on the property. But that night, no animals were alerted to anything. Even now, my family pokes fun at my grandma because she actually tried to shoot the devil. Whew.
Oh my gosh, that one is like so scary.
Yeah.
Because at first I was like, is this a real person? But I know this is a paranormal podcast. But like this whole email is already like, humans are also equally as scary as
Danger's everywhere.
Things. But I hate that this thing knew that she was alone too. Like knew that her husband and the uncles were not there.
Also, grandma, the fact that she's walking out there to get the firewood and she feels like someone's watching her, but she's still walking to go get the firewood.
Wasn't she trying to make coffee?
Yeah, but my God, I'd give up on the I think I'd be so terrified I'd just be awake. I don't need coffee after that.
That's true. Yeah, after that, I'd be so jittery.
I know. And the fact that it didn't just watch from the firewood, but like it truly came up and was watching through the window and growled.
Yeah.
I wonder, what it was trying to do.
Hey.
Okay. The third story was also at my grandparents' home, but it involves my parents. We would visit every year around Christmas time, and there were many festivities and, of course, so much alcohol. And one night, my dad came back drunk and started arguing with my mom. Me and my siblings were all sleeping, so we were oblivious to everything happening. The argument got so bad that my mom kicked my dad out of the house and told him to go to his parents' home. My grandma, who was up because she would wait for my grandpa and my uncles, suggested that he go sleep it off in a little sitting area in the house. My dad angrily agreed and he left to go sleep on the couch. My grandma and my mom were sitting in the kitchen discussing what had just happened when they heard a loud thud that shook the walls. It was so loud it woke up my aunts as well. As they were getting up to investigate the noise, my dad ran in, wide-eyed, super pale, My mom said that this was the first time she'd ever seen my dad genuinely terrified. He goes on to say that he woke up to someone whispering something in his ear. He thought it was my mom, so he didn't bother to open his eyes, and he swatted his hand to kind of motion for her to get away. A couple seconds later, he felt the couch moving, and he started sliding towards one end of the couch. It took him a second to comprehend that someone had lifted the couch, and he opened his eyes, and through the haziness, he saw a child-sized person standing at the lifted edge. He blinked a couple times to see more clearly, but the figure was then gone, and the couch slammed back onto the floor. At first, my mom thought that he had fallen from the couch and didn't realize since he was so drunk, but the floor had cracked from where the leg of the couch had fallen. And my dad stopped drinking after that. There were so many more stories of the devil, shadows, dolls, La Llorona, and witches that have happened to my family, all in Mexico, but those are the ones that are, in my opinion, unexplainable and the spookiest. I hope this email isn't too long. I hope you enjoyed these stories. See you on the other side, Lorena.
I don't even know how to process that one. That is terrifying. But it's also he stopped drinking after that, which is like, okay.
Terrified him enough.
He was scared straight.
Yeah. It's also so creepy because it wasn't like a child, but it was a child-sized being.
Right.
It makes me think it's like a little shadow figure that's, it's so creepy.
To have that much power, too, to drop the couch that the floor literally cracks, that's what scares me.
Totally.
Aside from like the firewood story, these other two stories, like the dolls and this one, I'm like, okay, it's terrifying, but there's also like an ulterior motive that ends up being positive, kind of, from the spirits. So I'm like, what are you?
Yeah. But then, like, are the arguments, is the anger, is the drinking all caused from kind of like the darkness and fear that maybe already exists in this house because of the spirits? Like, it's a what came first, the chicken or the egg sort of situation. Like, are these really horrifying experiences helping, or were they the ones that first caused it?
Right. Because we've heard a lot of stories where like people shift and change when there's dark entities around and cause all the anger.
Yeah. And then as soon as you remove them, it's like,
okay, well, that's a horrifying story.
we can always rely on the stories from Mexico to literally keep us up at night.
Yes. Okay, I have a story from our listener, Ailey, and it's called So Spooky. Okay.
Nice.
Hi, besties. I want to start off by saying that before your podcast, I was the biggest weenie for scary stories. I have encountered some paranormal activity, and I'm sure I've had a heart attack each time, so me and scary stories never really went well together. I found your podcast on accident and have been hooked from the first lesson. Now, not only do I listen to all of your scary stories, but I've also been known to dabble in some scary movies as well. Anywho, thank you for building this community and for all the work you put into it. It shows and it is appreciated. I adore you. On to my story. In advance, I talk a lot. Smiley face.
So do we. So much that we have a podcast. So
yes.
You came to the right place.
As soon as I turned 18 years old, I stuffed all of my belongings into a garbage bag and drove across the state to start a new life on the coast. I was full of adventure and had just received an inheritance from my grandfather, so that made me a kid with a little bit of money, and I wanted to run free. The first few days in the area, I slept in my car waiting for any apartment unit to call me back. On the fourth day, I got an approval and was given the okay to move into a 3-bedroom unit that had been empty for a few years, which is red flag number 1, but I didn't think of that. It was also relatively cheap for being in a desirable part of the city. Red flag number 2, 3, 4, and 5. I was not paying attention, but I was so over the moon. I was truly the luckiest girl in the world and totally crushing this whole being an adult thing.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to ignore all of the bad signs because it's like, well, how else am I just going to move forward and live?
And also, I think it's so easy to, after the fact, acknowledge things that are red flags. But in the moment, you're like, how serendipitous. This place is empty.
Totally.
Perfect timing.
It's meant to be. It was delivered to me by the universe. Yes.
Right. So I had secured a job before moving and I was able to cover the rent with my paycheck and my inheritance. I didn't want to cover all of the expenses by myself. So I basically was like, okay, I'm going to try and find a roommate. But I was in the apartment alone for about a week. In that week, I experienced some odd things that made me go, am I going crazy? At one point, I truly was like, do I have carbon monoxide exposure because of the amount of whispers I would hear throughout the day and creepy things that I could not explain? I was like, I have to be losing my mind, or carbon monoxide is definitely to blame. Cabinets would be open after I swore I closed them. The shower would run when I was certain I had turned it off. Sound of steps in the middle night, etc. Disclaimer, the fire department confirmed I was carbon monoxide free.
I will say I'm very glad that they called the fire department and they checked. It wasn't just like, we'll see what happens. Maybe it's this, maybe it's not. Because that's a very serious problem. And I think any fire department would gladly, even if it is nothing, they would rather spend the time making sure it's nothing than it be something.
All of these experiences made me want a roommate even more because, I mean, it's better to be scared together than scared alone, right?
Right.
I met Salima, aka Soli, at a market. She was a girl who needed a room, and I was a girl with rooms to spare. We hit it off right away, and Soli moved in a few days later, and I'm so glad she didn't turn out to be a serial killer or anything. Soli brought along her boyfriend Jake and her older brother Sam. Spoiler alert, and something nice. I grew up and I married Sam, and now we've been married for 20 years and have 4 kinda cute offspring.
Kinda cute? Probably super cute.
The first time we realized we were dealing with something paranormal was a few weeks after we settled into the apartment unit. I do love this. I feel like there should be a Friends sitcom, but about 4 people who move into a haunted apartment.
That's a great idea. Should we write one?
It's kind of like Ghosts, though.
It is like Ghosts.
But I'd rather you don't know the ghost. It's more of the shenanigans of the people who are being haunted.
Yeah, because Ghosts is mostly about the ghosts because Jay can't see the ghosts.
Right. Okay, hold on to your butt. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Out of nowhere, we began finding strands of long, thick, black hair in very unusual places. Under beds, inside the closet, even under sinks. None of us had black hair, so this was utterly perplexing. The more we cleaned up the hair, the more it would show up. With the amount of hair that we found, you could have sworn Cousin It had moved in.
Oh my God. Why is long black hair so scary? I feel like we can blame all of the Korean and Japanese horror movies for giving us that because it's The Ring and all those types of creatures. Shudder. It is horrifying.
Also, there is a weird gross, when you get in a shower and there's hair, it just it's something shedding off of a human. It is kind of gross, but this is even more terrifying because it's your home. No one has dark hair and you're finding it all over the place.
Right.
Along with the hair, we started to find traces of this coarse black powder. Again, the more we cleaned it, the more it would appear. So we're not entirely sure what was happening, but we chose to pretend as if it wasn't and tried to live as normally as possible. Throughout the duration of our tenancy, we were plagued with vivid and scary AF nightmares, each one more unsettling than the last. I cannot remember a night where one of us didn't wake up screaming or crying so loud that we woke up the others.
I am glad that they're experiencing this together because I feel like if they had not, it would feel almost less paranormal and like your roommate was possessed in the scary one.
Yes.
Right? Where you're like, holy shit, I just moved in with someone that I don't know.
Well, it's also terrifying because Ayla, I feel started hearing, it was whispers and weird, odd things in the beginning. But then when everyone else moved in, it seemed to amplify and get so much more intense.
More energy to feed off of.
Ugh.
Got stronger.
On one occasion, Sam and Jake had gone to the store because Soli and I caught a nasty cold. Her and I went out to the balcony to drink our coffee, and honestly, we wanted to get some peace from the heavy feelings that were thrown at us inside the unit. We were in the middle of the conversation when we both saw the sliding glass door roll shut and lock. We were outside. Something locked the door and was locking us outside.
Oh, jeez.
We literally had to wait on that balcony until the guys came back and let us in. And initially, they teased us, calling us clumsy, but soon enough, they too would experience this entity themselves. It was the week after July 4th. Jake came into my room and asked me if my friend was going to come back because he was getting ready to cook and wanted to make sure he cooked enough. I looked at him confused because I live 6 hours from home and my roommates were my only friends at this time. I asked him what he was talking about and he said, that girl who had been sitting at the kitchen table who had walked out without saying goodbye. He wanted to know if she was returning. Jake turned as white as a ghost with all the puns intended when I told him, I didn't have any friends.
I have no friends.
Well, I forgot to read the last word of the sentence, so that's on me. And now I'm embarrassed.
The scariest thing, I have no friends.
I don't have any friends over was the complete sentence.
Okay, there we go.
Sam's turn came about a month after. He was making his way out the door to go to work one morning when he saw what he swears was a girl sitting on the couch staring into the hallway. She didn't say anything. She just sat there and stared. Sam was so scared, he ran back into his room and called his boss and told him that he was cough, cough, too sick. that he couldn't go to work. Mean Girl reference. Please tell me you caught that. Hey, how full circle. We talked about that in the beginning.
Jumbo.
When we all sat and talked about what we had seen, we realized it was the same girl. Think spooky looking with, you guessed it, long black hair that covered her face like some sort of scary veil. No thanks.
Gosh.
The final straw came about 11 months into our tenancy. On this particular night, Sully's little brother, Mikey, who was 9 years old, came to stay over for the weekend. Since Sam and I were a new couple, Sam moved into my bedroom, leaving his old room available for Mikey to use whenever he came over. So the room was mostly unfurnished except for a small bed on the corner and a whole lot of toys. We had gotten settled into the living room for a movie night, and it was 100% Shrek because 1, what other movie would 4 adults sit and watch? And 2, it is the only DVD that we owned, so we watched it every weekend. And it wasn't for Mikey, it was for us. Anywho, for some reason, Mikey was told to go to his room. He was upset, and so he stomped all the way down the hall and made the most abrupt stop at the door. We could tell he was frozen with fear. We ran to his side, and there, inside the room, were all of his balls, baseballs, basketballs, footballs, spinning uncontrollably in the middle of the floor.
God, it's so freaky. I feel like that happens. I associate that with like a child ghost, but with everything else that has happened, I'm like, there's no way in hell that that's just like a little kid being like, ooh, a ball.
And all of the balls. It's not just one.
Right.
We were all frozen, wanting to run, but not being able to do so. So all of a sudden, our focus shifts to the corner of the room where Mikey's bed was. And there, in the darkness, was a woman cloaked in mist with long black hair. And although her facial features were not visible, her eyes were piercing and hollow, radiating an overwhelming fear. We spent the night at a friend's place that night and began the process of moving out immediately. The following weeks, as we moved things out, we all slept in the same room. We officially moved out the day our lease expired. And since then, we've all scattered to different areas. I found myself a short distance from Yosemite National Park, where I experienced one of the most terrifying encounters of my life, but that is a story for another day. Thank you for taking the time to read my spooky story. Keep up the good work. I'll see you on the other side. Tons of love. Ailey.
I mean, this is, who would ever expect to move into an apartment and have all of these experiences? And not only have these experiences, but like the frequency in which they happen. It happens to everyone who spends time in the apartment. Someone who is just coming in to visit is literally witnessing this woman, if that's even like the right way to describe that. Like, is it an entity? Is it just a ghost? Like, it feels like there's so much energy, and it is feeding off of the fear and the fact that they have night terrors every night. Like, it doesn't feel like it's just some third roommate. It's just like, girls' night. No.
Right. Because it would be one thing if it was just like the spirit appearing, like sitting on the couch, sitting at the table, in the bedroom.
Right.
Like, but no,
a hairbrush goes missing. A pillow is moved. Like a book is now gone. That would be roommate behavior.
No. This is like weird, terrifying. Like, what is this building? I want to know where it was. Can we find out the location? Because it probably still exists.
I also want to know, like, when a ghost leaves behind its hair like that. I mean, I understand that there's all this magic and power within the paranormal, but part of me is thinking, like, in the globs of hair that's just like left behind, are there now bald spots? Like, is this becoming a stringier and stringier situation? Did we go from Samara to Gollum? Is essentially
I don't think so. I feel like that's the creepier thing, is that like she was shedding her hair everywhere, but like never actually losing any hair.
Yeah.
Also, what is ghost hair even made of?
I know. Could you keep it? Bag it up. Send it to us. No, wait, don't. Actually, never mind. I changed my mind. Don't. Please.
Corinne's going to be rocking in a new hairstyle soon.
I'm going to have black bangs. I'm just making it into a clip-on bangs, just black ghost hair.
Man.
But it's one of those things where it's like, if you kept it and sent it to a lab, like what would it come back? Is there any DNA? Like who is it?
I would love to do this experiment. How do we do this?
Right?
Let's go move into that house. Another situation where you're like, you go by yourself and FaceTime me in.
Yeah, you let me know when you get the hair. I'll find a lab. That will be my participation. I'll find a lab to do some tests.
You bring the lab.
And that's the extent.
And I'll do what our listener, I think it was Alexandra, did, where I FaceTime you the whole time just in case anything happens to me and I get murdered. You can help solve my case.
You'd have to, honestly, I feel like you'd have to live stream your life on social media to keep yourself safe in that situation. It's like one FaceTime with me is not long enough.
Yeah, I'll do multiple platforms. So I'll have you on FaceTime, live stream on Instagram. You know, we'll do all the things.
Could be a reality show. Quite honestly. Let's figure out a way to monetize this.
That is your expertise. How do we turn this into a financial endeavor?
How do I make money off of Sabrina's terror? Okay. I have an email, and we did read one of the encounters from this email in our 2 Girls, 1 Goat episode. And that's all we'll say about that. Okay, so I'm going to read all the rest.
The only time we've ever addressed that episode.
Hey, ghostess, fruit flies, cat, and other entities. I'm not sure we should be addressing any entities around here. I'm a longtime listener, first-time writer, and you could probably do an entire encounters episode on my stories alone. I'm going to write all of them, and you can pick and choose from the ones that you want to read. I think my first encounter occurred when my grandmother passed away. And this is my dad's mother, and we were very close, and we would spend every summer with her because it was cheap babysitting. And every morning she made coffee for my dad, and he went to work while he dropped us off at her place. And unfortunately, the way that she died, she had been very sick for a very long time with dementia and lung cancer. She was staying at my aunt's house at this point, and we all went over to see her that afternoon, and things took a turn for the worse. And my dad decided that we were going to spend the night and that we would sleep on the pull-out couch in my aunt's basement. I woke up very early in the morning to a voice, and the voice was soft-spoken and soothing, but it was unlike any voice I'd ever heard before. It was not my dad, it was not my aunt, it was not my uncle, but it said to me, "It's okay. She's going to go soon. It's okay."
Oh, I wonder who this was.
And not 20 seconds later, does my uncle run down the stairs. He's crying. He wakes up my father and he says, "Bob, she's going." In that moment, my grandmother passed away with her family all around her. Wow. Ever since that day, I have felt her with me. I believe she picked my partner and brought him to me, and we coincidentally started seeing each other on her death anniversary. Some people think that that's morbid, but I think it's more her showing her approval.
I don't think that's morbid. I think that's special. No. Yeah.
That's some spirit intervention.
And it's nice that you have this aspect of your relationship that reminds you of your grandmother. Like, I think that's beautiful.
And out of all the days that you could have met.
Out of all 365 days.
I felt my grandma protecting me on a number of occasions. Recently, my partner and I were trying to go on a hike in the Great Smoky Mountains. And the first hike, the road was closed. And on our approach to the second hike, my car battery died. We got a jump and we took it to an advanced auto parts, and the car and the battery were perfectly fine. And I had this thought that maybe it was my grandma, and then I got shivers down my spine. I have no idea what may have happened on that hike, but I'm glad she stopped us from finding out. A similar heartfelt one occurred when my dad's father passed away. My dad and his dad were very close, and my grandfather had built his house with his own hands. After his funeral, we all went over to his house, which my uncle now owned. However, no one had lived there in a while because my grandpa had been in assisted living, so the power had not been turned back on yet. We did the usual post-funeral thing with food and telling stories while my aunt's iPod was playing some random music in the background. Eventually, it became time to leave, and as we were packing up, my grandpa's favorite song, "You Are My Sunshine," came on.
Oh,
so we all took a moment standing there in the living room listening to the song. And as the song came to a close, my aunt said, "Okay, Homer, we have to go now." And as she said it, the floor lamp in the corner flickered on for a few seconds, and then it turned off. Everyone in that room saw it, and it baffled us because there wasn't supposed to be any power on in this house. My dad picked up the cord. It wasn't even plugged in.
That is so amazing, and the fact that everyone was there together.
Yes.
The encounters in this episode are really doing it for me today.
Yeah, they're intense. This is like full throttle.
I feel like we are reading 4 people's stories, but we are delivering by no effort on our own. We are delivering
we take no credit.
So many stories. There's 40 in this episode.
Truly. So my dad looks at the lamp and he says, "Dad, if this is you, turn it on." And he waved his hand towards the lamp. And as he did this gesture, the lamp turned on. We all watched it for a couple more seconds, and my dad said, "Okay, bye, Dad. We love you." And then the light turned off, and it just wouldn't turn back on again.
I'm shook.
Okay, now for some spooks. So a couple years ago, when I started my first job, I lived really far from the bars in my town, and one of my coworkers lived pretty close, so if we got a little too tipsy, she would let me crash at her place if I didn't want to pay for the Uber back across town to my place. I only crashed there maybe twice, but both times I've had experiences. The first one was, of course, on Halloween. We had gone downtown, And then we went back to her place with Taco Bell because, of course.
Duh.
And she let me crash on the couch, but left the hallway light on near the bathroom just in case I needed to get up and pee in the night. And this made it possible for me to see down the entire hallway from the couch. And anyway, I passed out. It's around 4 a.m. and I'm awoken for no reason. No sounds, nothing. Just open my eyes and I see this very large, as tall as the ceiling, shadow of a man standing outside of her bedroom door. I'm still fairly drunk and I don't know what to do, so I just turn over and I close my eyes and I pretend it's not there. In the morning, I get out as quick as I can, and I didn't tell her because she lived alone and I didn't want to spook her. Plus, I will say the shadow figure did not feel threatening. It's possible that it was just maybe passing through on Halloween or something. I don't know. But the second time I stayed at her house, this one gave me the creeps. It was a similar situation that we had to work late and I didn't want to drive home, and so I crashed on her couch again. However, this time the couch was in the middle of the living room, not in the corner. I remember having a dream of this old lady watching over me from the corner, dressed in all black. And it was so vivid and I felt like it was so real that I actually woke up and I looked at the corner to check to see if this woman was there. There was nothing in the corner, and so I chalked it up to, it just maybe is a weird dream. And I decide I'll go back to sleep. As soon as I closed my eyes, I saw the vision of the same woman back in that corner, starting to walk closer to me.
Oh.
And at this point, I was really freaked out. So I booked it out of my friend's house and I drove home at 4 a.m. I ended up telling her about this incident and the previous one, and she had never experienced anything in that house. But she did tell me that she rents from a woman whose mother owned the house but had passed away a couple months before my friend moved in. I'm guessing the woman didn't really like me being there, or maybe was just curious about what I was doing because my friend is usually alone. I don't know, but I never went back to her house again.
I mean, that's two experiences like in that same room at the same time in the middle of the night. I wouldn't want to sleep there either.
My next story was during a camping trip in the mountains of North Carolina. One of my friends had just inherited a cabin from his uncle who was recently passed. And then they write, Sabrina, feel free to use this as an opening scene for a horror movie that you write.
Oh, okay.
The cabin hadn't been kept up, so it was pretty much uninhabitable. And my friends, who were two couples, and I, the fifth wheel at the time, decided to camp outside of the cabin on the grounds around it. This was Labor Day weekend, so the first 2 days were great. And the couple who owned the place slept in a tent with their 2 dogs, and the other couple and I shared an 8-person tent. The first 2 nights went fine, nothing weird, no issues whatsoever. But night 3 was terrifying.
Oh no.
It started when we were all sitting around the fire, and we heard what sounded like a wolf howl up in the mountains. It was eerie, but it was not that crazy. But then a couple minutes later, at the end of the property, maybe 100 yards from where we were sitting, we hear another howl. And their 2 dogs start going crazy, like circling the property, barking, snarling, running back and forth to different sides. And I've never seen them act like that.
Trust your pets.
Trust your pets. Our friend whose place it was expressed how he wasn't concerned. And I politely informed him that wolves and coyotes, they hunt in packs and they circle their prey. So after that information, he started freaking out as well. And we all decided, yeah, maybe we should turn in for the night. And as we were walking to the tent, I had this scary feeling like something really bad was about to happen. And from that point on, I could not sleep. Everything felt heavy and full of dread for hours. As I'm lying there in the tent, unable to sleep, I heard what sounded like a car driving up their driveway. And then it looked like people were walking around the fire. But I knew it wasn't my friends because I would have heard them open their tent. And these figures walk in circles a couple times around the fire, and then the fire slowly goes out. At this point, I'm on the verge of losing it, and then I hear another howl and the sounds of dogs running around the outskirts of the cabin. All I can think in my mind is, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone, over and over, until finally, at some point, not sure how long it was, the feeling of dread lifted and the air felt lighter, and I felt like I could breathe again, and I was able to fall asleep.
That's horrifying. How did it just stop?
And also, it's like the car lights. Like, was that like a mix of paranormal energy or just like evil surrounding actual people who came? Like, what was it? It's so scary when you're camping.
I know. Was it
And
people?
Could you see their tents from the glow of the fire, or was it far enough away where they were unseen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, for the final story. This one makes me feel uneasy. When I told my boss the story, she said it changed her life and she will never go camping because of it.
All right, everyone.
This was, buckle up.
Hope you're not camping while you listen to this.
I know. This was Memorial Day weekend, 2022. My partner and I were in Arizona on a 4-day work break from a project we were working on in Wyoming. We decided that we would go camping in Sedona and near the Grand Canyon. The first night in Sedona was perfect, and we had an incredible time, and we stayed at a paid campsite and had no issues. The second night, we found a free campsite near the Grand Canyon, one of those fire roads, maybe 15 minutes from the park entrance, and the campsite looked really nice, and it was spacious and partially wooded. There was a fire ban, but we were here for it anyway. We set up our tent, and then we went into the park. That night, we came back, we cooked some food on a propane grill, and then we went to bed. I had trouble sleeping and it felt a little uneasy, but my partner parked the car close to the tent in case we needed to escape, and that really did help ease my worries a bit. At some point, I finally fell asleep, and then I woke up in the middle of the night from a nightmare where it was morning, and I leaned over to kiss my partner awake, but he was covered in blood and stabbed to death. It was a horrible nightmare, but I do have spooky dreams often, and so I didn't think that much of it, and I went back to sleep.
Okay.
One thing about my partner is that he gets sleep paralysis sometimes, and we have an agreement that if I hear him make any noises in his sleep, I have to wake him up. So I am hearing him make some sleep noises, and so I wake him up, and he's in a sweat, and he's clearly disoriented, and he says, "Thank you," and then he goes back to sleep. The next day, we pack up to go to Phoenix, which is our last night in Arizona before heading back to Wyoming, and we decide to go get tacos. We're at dinner, and I have this urge to ask him what his bad dream was about. I've never asked this man about his sleep paralysis dreams before because I low-key feel like they're contagious, but I weirdly had the urge to ask. He said he didn't want to tell me while we were still camping, but he dreamt that we were in a tent and he heard sudden whispers outside of the tent, and then all of a sudden a knife started poking through the tent walls, stabbing him and trying to pull him out of the tent, and that's when I woke him up. I'm over here sitting with my hands covering my mouth because I then had to tell him that I had the same dream, or at least a terrifying similar dream. Safe to say, we haven't tent camped since, and I will not be returning to the Grand Canyon anytime soon. Thank you for being your wonderful, spooky selves and getting me through long work days out in the deserts of Wyoming. See you on the other side, Nicole.
Nicole, that last one it's scary to me, but I'm curious if they both were dreaming of something that has happened before. Like, was there a murder there? Or was there someone in a nearby camp who was like wanting to do that, which is way more terrifying?
Yeah, and they're like picking up on what could have been.
I'm just glad that you guys were okay.
Seriously. And it's also so scary. Like, there's just so much land and so much desert and forest and stuff out there that I do feel like, not to freak anyone out, but like, I feel like these sort of things where people go missing and they're near campsites and whatnot, like, it's possible for something like that to happen and for us to never have answers as to where that person went, what happened to that couple. Did they just fall hiking, or were they literally stabbed to death in their tent and taken?
Well, okay. It's hard because it's like, to me, I understand the appeal of camping. Mm-hmm. If you put aside the like dangers and the bugs and sleeping on the ground.
Yeah.
But it does feel like you are putting yourself in a way more vulnerable position than you would be in. Because like, you're not safe anywhere, technically. Like, there's so many dangers in the world and people are bad. And if someone wants to hurt you, they could find a way to get to you. But I just feel like camping, you're putting yourself in a situation where, you're way more vulnerable than I would prefer to be.
And Nicole has now had 2 freaky camping experiences and not even anywhere near each other, like opposite ends of the US. I feel like that 2 and done. No more tent camping.
I want to know if there are like Grand Canyon hauntings. Maybe that's a fun one to do.
That is a fun one to do. I'm sure there is. There's such weirdness and vibes there. And people die there a lot. I know. It's very sad. But my God, Nicole's experiences, there's so many. The grandparents' ones are lovely and heartwarming. But my God, some of these other ones.
Honestly, I don't even remember the other ones because I'm just thinking about that nightmare.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other one was just like she was experiencing some hauntings at her coworker's apartment.
Can we talk about how many like moments of serendipity there were in this episode? Nicole literally talked about a story about wolves. I'm wearing a wolf shirt.
And you're wearing a wolf shirt.
We had a Mean Girl reference.
And we opened the episode with Jumbo, which is one of the first things said in Mean Girls.
I feel like there were a couple other ones, but there was a lot in this episode. Yeah, it is a bit Twilight Zone-y where I'm like, something weird's going to happen today. I have a feeling.
My gosh.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's like a good thing. Like, I think something good's going to happen today.
Aliens are coming for you finally.
Fuck yes.
Took you going to New Jersey to get abducted again.
I mean, I am going to Morristown where my sister lives. There's like a infamous alien hoax in Morristown, New Jersey.
No, really?
Yeah.
So I feel like something else just happened in Morristown because I was like, oh shit, that's exactly where Lexi lives. If I remember it, I'll figure it out. Maybe I saw the same thing where it was like a reference to the hoax.
Oh, I think they're opening a Rumble in Morristown. Are you keeping up on Rumble?
No idea what a Rumble is.
Oh, it's like a kickboxing type of like class.
Oh, okay. No thanks.
I've never been, but I've heard of it. It's a nice day. Everyone's walking outside. So
lovely.
Maybe all of us should do the same, but watch your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Keep an eye out for the ghosts. And if you see them, email us.
Email us.
2girlsoneghost@gmail.com.
Tell everybody about our podcast. Rate and review for us and for all the other podcasts that you listen to, because it truly does help.
Mm-hmm.
And then follow us on all social media. You can watch us on YouTube. And if you're interested in listening to all of our episodes 1 week early and ad-free, and also have additional bonus episodes that are only for Patreon, you can check out our Patreon tier. We have audio and video options there. And we also have a lot of cool things like book club. We have, what are we reading now for book club?
We're reading The September House by Carissa Orlando. And it's a really spooky book. I haven't started yet, but highly recommend if you want to join our book club, get that book, read it along with us, listen to it if you need to, or don't read it and just come hang out with us.
Yeah, it's all good fun. And shout out to Jamie, who edits our podcast, audio and video. Thank you. And edits our bonus episodes that we have on Patreon.
And edits all the burps out. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of you for coming back each week to listen to our podcast, to email us your stories, to engage with this community. We would not be the most haunted podcast in America without all of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And we will see you on the other side.
Very spooky.